Hey, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. The purpose of this briefing is to update you on the government's next steps to increase grocery competition and reduce food prices for Kiwis. Today I'll be announcing new legislation that we will shortly introduce to Parliament and several other changes the government is making to ease the way for new competitor supermarkets in New Zealand. I'll also give you an update on the wider grocery work programme. I'm going to take some time to step through each of these announcements, so it'll take a few minutes. To recap, one of the reasons New Zealand shoppers pay higher prices than shoppers in many other countries is the relative lack of competition in our grocery sector. The three major supermarket players in New Zealand, Foodstuffs North Island, Foodstuffs South Island and Woolworths, together make up 82% of the market. They exhibit major market power and effectively operate as a duopoly. The result is higher prices for New Zealanders and fewer choices about where and how we shop. New Zealand First and the New Zealand National Party have a coalition commitment to explore options for improving competition in the grocery sector, and the government has been carefully considering the best ways to do that. In March, we issued a formal request for information asking existing players and potential new entrants what we should do to boost competition in the New Zealand grocery sector. 24 responses came in, providing us with detailed information about what's been preventing more competition in the New Zealand grocery sector. I want to take this time today to thank all of those who put effort into sharing their views. 5 responses came from completely new prospective competitors. These were all domestic players, and some had clearly substantiated, credible proposals for new grocery formats and approaches designed to cater specifically to the unmet needs of Kiwi shoppers. Their proposals were encouraging to read. 11 submissions came from grocery businesses already operating in New Zealand, including Foodstuffs and Woolworths, and other smaller players with aspirations to expand their offering to more Kiwi shoppers. And 8 submissions came from advocacy groups and interested parties. Submitters have put their faith in the confidentiality of the process, and I won't undermine their plans today by releasing commercially sensitive information about their specific intentions. Taken as a whole, however, their submissions have made clear the actions the government can take right now to make it easier to establish new, commercially viable supermarkets in New Zealand. The key message from the submissions was this: when potential supermarket competitors look at New Zealand right now, they see far too many regulatory stop signs and red lights. Our government is determined to change that view from no to go. To address the issues raised through the RFI, we have 3 streams of work underway: regulatory, enforcement and structural reform. Today's announcement is focused on the regulatory work stream, and I'll have more to say about the other 2 work streams in future. The RFI identified a range of regulatory barriers to supermarket competition. Many respondents reported difficulties finding suitable supermarket sites and good locations with the right infrastructure. They said these problems were made worse by restrictive council zoning and lengthy, uncertain, expensive consent processes. They told us that the time and cost involved in applying for resource and building consents for new supermarkets creates uncertainty for any new development and makes New Zealand an unattractive place to set up shop. We were told it can take up to 4 years to get permission for a new supermarket, and that reaching that point can cost millions of dollars. That is the culture of no on full display, and that is the culture our government is changing. These costs and delays weaken the potential business case for new investments. As you're aware, the government already has work underway to improve resource and building consent processes across the economy, and of course that work continues. In the meantime, given the urgency of New Zealand's grocery problems, we are accelerating a number of specific changes to encourage more supermarket competition. Today I'm announcing that the government will introduce legislation creating a specific fast-track pathway for new supermarket developments that increase competition. We are creating an express lane for new supermarkets. We will amend the existing fast-track approvals regime to ensure supermarket developers can make use of this accelerated process, as long as their development improves competition. The fast-track amendments will be introduced to Parliament in November and will be passed by the end of the year. This will ensure that resource consents for new supermarkets can be considered on sites not currently zoned for that purpose, and they will ensure that any infrastructure issues can be dealt with at the same time. In addition to this, we will significantly speed up and simplify the building consent process for grocery developments with a new one-stop shop consenting option. Right now, New Zealand has 68 different building consent authorities that each have different processes for issuing consents, inspecting building work, and issuing code compliance certificates. This massively increases the cost, complexity, and uncertainty for anyone wanting to build new supermarkets at scale and pace. We are fixing this by designating a single building consent authority to standardise building consent applications for grocery developments that would enable competition regionally or nationally. Developers will also be offered the opportunity to get standardised building designs pre-approved through a new multi-proof scheme. Together, these changes will improve the consistency and pace of the building consent process for new supermarkets. The Overseas Investment Act is another bugbear raised by potential competitors. Most of their concerns will be addressed through the changes already being progressed by the Honourable David Seymour through the Overseas Investment Amendment Bill, which we intend to pass into law this year. But to ensure that these changes work for supermarkets, Minister Seymour intends to spell out to interested parties how the streamlined pathways will work for them, and he will also update his ministerial directive letter to emphasise that the government will look favourably on investments from international firms seeking to compete with the dominant grocery retailers. Several potential competitors also raised concern that existing players could potentially use predatory pricing to effectively stamp out new operators. We will not put up with that. And so the government has agreed to strengthen provisions in the Commerce Act to prevent this conduct from happening. We also want to ease the way for potential new importers of food who may wish to bring new products to our shelves. Minister Seymour is already conducting a regulatory review in this area, and we are actively exploring options for potential importers of food to bring new product lines into the country. In summary, the regulatory changes the government is announcing today respond directly to the specific issues raised by those in the know. Taken together, they will make New Zealand a much easier place to open a competitive new supermarket that delivers good deals for Kiwis. So, will potential competitors respond to these changes? We're conscious that choosing to invest in a new supermarket is ultimately a commercial decision for individual businesses to make. All sorts of factors will influence their thinking. The government is not proposing to fund them. What we are doing is making New Zealand a far more attractive option for new supermarket developments. And we're ensuring that when developers do decide to invest, they can get new stores opened much, much faster. As evidence of this, I can confirm that the government has been in talks with Costco about its plans for New Zealand. Costco is a major international grocery player whose annual revenue exceeds New Zealand's GDP. Its single West Auckland store has already improved competitive dynamics in that local area and created a new export pathway for several New Zealand food suppliers. Costco have explicitly told us that the government's changes will assist their future expansion plans for New Zealand, and they have confirmed they can see opportunities for several new stores in New Zealand to be built within the next few years. This is good news for Kiwi shoppers who will benefit from more choice and more competitive prices. We hope that the government's changes will also encourage other international and domestic players to see New Zealand as a better option for new supermarkets in future. As I said earlier, we are also continuing work on enforcement and structural reform changes. I am concerned that existing consumer protection measures in the Fair Trading Act are not sufficiently incentivising supermarkets to ensure accurate pricing, and that as a result, Kiwi shoppers are not always getting a fair deal. Officials have recently completed consultation on measures to strengthen the penalties and enforcement powers available to the Commerce Commission for breaches of the Fair Trading Act. Proposed changes to that Act will shortly be considered by Cabinet and will be subject to a future update. The Commission itself is looking to further strengthen the Grocery Supply Code and is considering potential changes to the wholesale supply regime. Finally, we are continuing work on options for structural reform of the grocery sector. Some RFI respondents argued that the only way to truly improve competition in the grocery market is for the government to forcibly break up Foodstuffs and or Woolworths due to their entrenched market positions. A decision to restructure the supermarkets is not a decision that would be taken lightly. It would be a significant intervention that would carry costs and risks that would need to be rigorously weighed against consumer benefits. But there is a possibility that even if the government makes successful changes to regulatory and enforcement settings, we may not achieve the competition that Kiwi shoppers need and deserve. That's why I have commissioned a cost-benefit analysis on specific structural options. This work is well advanced and will inform future advice I take to Cabinet on whether further legislative change is required to improve competition. I want to state again that we remain open to potential market-led solutions that may be put forward by the major incumbents. In closing, the changes I've outlined today will remove significant barriers to supermarket competition in New Zealand. The government is building an express lane for new supermarkets. We are tearing down the barriers that for too long have protected the supermarket duopoly and their profit margins. As I've said before, I want to see at least one major competitor who can operate at scale and really shake up the market. We are progressing substantive reforms to support that, and I welcome your questions.
How quickly are you hoping new Costco's might be popping up around the country?
Well, that's a question for Costco. What they have made very clear to us is that these changes the government is making will speed that up no end. At the moment, it can be a matter of years between someone deciding to make an investment and getting the permission. These changes I'm announcing today reduce that to a matter of months.
What's the timeline on that structural separation stuff?
Well, I will be reporting back to Cabinet on that in due course.
A couple of the big global grocery players didn't take part in this. Were you disappointed by that?
Yes, I was. But what I'm hopeful of is that now we have a really strong welcome mat to present to them. And I reckon they should give New Zealand another look.
It's hardly a vote of confidence, though, is it? They didn't even take part.
Well, I think that reflects the fact that those supermarkets have a number of markets across the world where they're already expanding. And look, this exercise has made it clear. New Zealand has a reputation for being a really hard place to set up a new supermarket. We have to change that reputation. And the changes that the government is setting out today make it crystal clear that instead of being one of the hardest places on earth to open a new supermarket, we're making ourselves one of the easiest places on earth to open a supermarket.
Is that why they're not interested in coming here? Because of those roadblocks? I mean, if they didn't take part, how can you say that?
Well, there'll be a number of reasons, but it's always the case that when people consider going into a new market, the headaches are, well, what's the process for getting permission, consents, how long will it take, how uncertain is it? And the reality that's been laid bare by this exercise is that when people look at New Zealand, they go, oh my gosh, it can take years to get permission, you don't know if you'll ever get it, it costs a huge amount of money, everyone complains, and you might just get a big fat no at the end of it. Well, what we're saying is a big fat yes to new supermarkets.
Did Costco say to you that they wouldn't open new stores unless these changes were made?
Costco were one of the submitters to the process, and they laid out really clearly the headaches they faced when they opened their store in West Auckland. They compared our processes with those in Australia and pointed out how often more expensive and cumbersome they are than what they've experienced in other countries. That was really instructive for us. Then, as we've been developing these processes, we needed to test them to say, well, would this be enough to make a difference? Would this ease your worry? And we have been testing that through our engagement with Costco, and they have made clear that they think this will smooth the way.
So New Zealand's laws were the reason why only West Auckland ever got a Costco, even though they were talking about Christchurch and Wellington when they opened. None of that's happened because of the law.
We have allowed well-intended green and red tape to stand in the way of new supermarket competition. There is no doubt in my mind that the complexity of our consenting regulations has made it too hard to open up competitor shops in New Zealand. Well, today we are ending that. We're tearing down those barriers and we're saying yes to new supermarkets. As I say, ultimately businesses will make their own decisions, but we are putting on our best dress and saying we're ready for the dance.
Almost exactly 3 years ago, Jacinda Ardern said that she was going to improve competition in the supermarket industry by throwing open the storeroom doors of foodstuffs and countdown to competitors. This is promising express lane for new supermarkets. Can you understand shoppers perhaps being cynical, I guess, about these grandiose claims and what may eventuate from them?
Yes, I can, and that's why we have worked hard to get at the root causes of this issue. And it's clear that the previous government's changes in this area haven't borne enough fruit, which is why we're taking a new approach. It's obvious to us that if you want new supermarket competitors, you have to ask the people with the money to do that why they're not doing it. They've given us really clear reasons why they're not, and we are addressing them systematically, one by one, so that taken together, we now have a compelling welcome mat for anyone thinking about establishing new supermarkets. This provides us a platform that when we talk to international players, we can say, welcome on in, it's easy here, we really, really want you.
For clarity, did any of the businesses that you talked to tell you that this package of reforms, all of which have been sort of, I guess, canvassed and discussed before, would be sufficient to encourage them to set up a new nationwide third supermarket group?
Well, what this policy today responds to is the broad themes across multiple submissions. These were recurrent themes, and we have pulled them all together into a package of announcements that collectively we think will make the difference. As I said, we have had a number of domestic players who have expressed interest in establishing a nationwide grocery offering. We have looked at those submissions and we believe that they could be credible, but ultimately it will be up to those individual businesses to find the capital and demonstrate the business plans to make that happen.
What was the top theme? What was the top theme of all of the themes that they gave to you?
That we just tie people up in red tape. That if people want to get something done in this country, if they want to invest money, if they want to build something, or they want to make something, we just say, well, here's 1,000 forms, good luck to you, and a few years later we check in.
It wasn't the duopoly issue, the idea that separating the incumbents would make life easier for a new entrant. That wasn't the top piece of feedback.
Well, that came through clearly in two ways. One, concern from players who said, well, even if we establish some stores, we're worried that the existing players would use their market power to stamp us out, that they would use predatory pricing and other measures to stop us succeeding. And that's why we've made the decision to amend the Commerce Act to ensure that we can prevent that from happening. The other theme that came through from a range of submitters, although not all, was that they did believe that ultimately structural separation of the existing players may be needed to make this a truly competitive market.
Coalition partners along that?
Well, look, what we are joined in a coalition is a very clear commitment that this should be a more competitive supermarket sector, that will deliver better prices for New Zealand shoppers. And I've seen a real willingness across the cabinet table to take bold steps to make that happen. These are measures that have not previously been considered that we're all united in taking.
David Seymour says you should stop, beating up on them so much. It doesn't sound like someone who's about to get out the meat cleaver and chop them up.
Well, I've been delighted that David Seymour is right there next to me saying, how do we make sure that new competitors can get through the Overseas Investment Act quickly, that labelling rules don't stand in the way, that we're getting rid of the red and green tape. And so I think he stands with me in saying the status quo isn't good enough, we have to fix it. Because ultimately the beneficiaries of that are Kiwi shoppers.
Have consultants at Coriolis reported back to you yet?
Oh look, I've had some interim reporting, but we're continuing to take a range of advice, not just from Coriolis.
So when will their final report on divestment options be delivered to you?
I don't have a date for that.
So hold on, that's the big stick. So, and they're the people doing the work on how to use the big stick. So when is that? What's an update on that work?
As I said in my remarks, I am continuing to take advice on structural options, and once those have been considered, I'll report to
Who
Cabinet.
else are you taking advice from, and what are the sort of issues being raised on that?
Well, my first port of call was to talk to the people in the industry themselves. They're the people who understand what it takes to set up a new supermarket. They're the ones who understand the risks and rewards at play and what can stop it happening. That's what the request for information process was all about. And we've been continuing to engage with existing players and potential entrants throughout this process. We also, of course, have officials from a range of agencies, the Commerce Commission, the Ministry for Business, and others who are providing advice on these matters. And they, as is appropriate, are engaging specialist advice where needed.
Are the risks of that simply too big? Like, are you worried that...
Well, it's too soon to say. As I say, it is really important to acknowledge there would be risks and also that there would be costs. And so it would only make sense if we can satisfy ourselves that the benefits to the Kiwi shopper would outweigh those risks and costs. And we haven't completed that analysis yet. And it's really important that we do that thoroughly, because no one's going to thank us if we make a big change, but it doesn't actually deliver for the shopper. But we think there has been strong enough feedback on this matter from those in the know that we should bottom it out, take it really seriously.
The previous government explored this exact issue with the same consultants, and they said that there were risks. So the issue has been looked into. What is the hold up? Like, if you're serious about this, what's the hold up with the big sort of, the biggest attack line that you could take?
Well, there's been a lot of water flowing under the bridge since then. We've had the Grocery Commissioner set up, and we've had much more active monitoring of the sector, which provides a better information base for doing this analysis. Second, I don't believe the last government had done enough to remove the barriers that were already there. And I think that these measures that we are taking today are necessary, because actually what we ultimately want to see is new supermarkets opening in New Zealand with new formats, new pricing options, new supply chains that offer something truly different to the Kiwi shopper, hard discounts, different product types. And so in order to get that, you actually have to talk to the people who might open a shop like that and say to them, what would it take? We've done that.
New Zealanders will be looking for relief from their grocery bills right now. So how long will they have to wait from today's announcement before they see that?
Well, that is in the power of the existing supermarkets right now. Any day they can make a choice to reduce their margins and offer lower food prices for New Zealanders. The changes I'm announcing today will make it far more likely that they do so in future. Put it this way, if you're a New World or a Woolworths and a new Costco opens up next door, chances are you're going to sharpen up your pricing.
The fast track process, I guess, could exclude local communities from having a say about whether a supermarket was set up in their neighbourhood. I mean, what's the justification for that? Because,
There you are with your big fat stop sign. There you are with the big fat stop sign that is preventing New Zealanders from getting the fair deal they deserve at the supermarket checkout aisle. And that is the exact attitude that has characterised New Zealand for the last couple of decades and has held back developments that any sensible Kiwi would want. Yes, a new supermarket might mean new cars on the road. Yes, it might mean a big, bright, garish sign. Yes, it might mean that there's a few more people on the streets disrupting the view of the trees. But you know what's more important? That Kiwis can afford their local food shop. And actually right now, too many can't. So we have got to get our priorities straight here. Is the priority the toads and the frogs and people's views on visual pollution? Because I don't think that should be the priority. The priority should be New Zealanders being able to afford their weekly grocery shop.
But those new supermarkets, they're set up to serve a local community. The people who visit that new supermarket will be the people who live nearby it. Why shouldn't they have a say in whether a new supermarket
They've had their say.
is or not?
Go and talk to any New Zealander and they will say that their grocery shop costs too much. This is what's needed to fix that.
And what are your hopes in terms of downward pressure on prices? I mean, at what point would you consider it a success story?
Well, I've said previously that the measure for me is you want to see nationwide a new chain of supermarkets opening up. That's the ultimate destination. But along the way, you've seen that even the impact of one new store in a local community can have a big impact. You know, you talk to people who shop at Costco in West Auckland, they'll say, well, actually, it's not only that you can get cheaper butter there, it's that they noticed a marked change in the pricing behaviour of the local New Worlds and Woolworths and Pack and Saves when that Costco came along. So what you can see all over the world is that when a competitor with lower prices turns up, whether it's an Aldi or a Lidl or a Costco, it doesn't just mean cheaper prices in that shop, it means that everyone in the competitive market sharpens up their act.
Is there any hard data to support that? Or like what happened to prices in West Auckland that you're aware of?
Yes, there is some data to suggest that it did have an impact on the competitive dynamic in that local market, and I believe that the Commerce Commission have referenced that in their grocery report.
What is the relationship between Treasury and the Reserve Bank at the moment?
It's a good, strong relationship.
Are you aware of an email that Reserve Bank Chair Neil quickly sent to the Treasury in April after Adrian Orr's resignation, saying that if the Treasury was to release minutes about one of your meetings, it would, quote, immediately destroy the goodwill between Treasury and the bank, that he was shocked that the Treasury took minutes of that meeting, and he was shocked that the comments are so detailed?
Yes, I am aware of that email, and I disagree with the views put forward by the Chair, because I think it's entirely appropriate for Treasury officials to take minutes of significant government meetings.
The head of the Reserve Bank's legal team also sent an email to the Treasury in which he said that to record that such information and to disclose that may inhibit the ability of the bank to meet with the Treasury and yourself in the future. What does that say about the approach to transparency by the bank?
Well, I disagree with that individual's characterisation there, and as I've said previously, my view is that wherever possible, public institutions should be transparent and accountable, bearing in mind any other legal obligations they have. On this matter, the Treasury formed a clear view that it was in the public interest to release that information, and I agree with their decision.
So you're confident that the Treasury and the Reserve Bank can continue to work constructively going forward?
Absolutely. I've been in meetings very recently in which they work very constructively.
Do you think they have a culture of secrecy at the bank? Or did have a culture of secrecy at that time?
Well, I continue to encourage them to seek a culture of openness and accountability wherever appropriate.
Do you think it's a bit rich of the Reserve Bank to question the Treasury when the Treasury is in charge of looking after the money that the Reserve Bank seems so insistent on pissing up the wall?
Well, look, as I've said, I agree. I agree with the Treasury that where possible we should lean towards transparency and accountability in these matters, and I've sided with them on that. You know, that's on the record. And I also agree with the Treasury that the Reserve Bank got far too much funding under the last government. We're pretty out there to suggest that they should get even more under this government, and I'm pleased that we now have a more constrained funding environment for the Reserve Bank. And I'd also note that the Reserve Bank have really constructively engaged with that reality, getting to work on delivering a more efficient, streamlined Reserve Bank. They seem to have approached that constructively, and I think that's positive for New Zealand taxpayers and everyone involved. One of the
meetings one assumes Treasury was at, you know, with the meeting where the former Finance Minister underwrote Treasury, the Reserve Bank's money printing. You're still on the hook for those losses, but the government was on the hook for billions of dollars of losses there. Do you think the Reserve Bank needs to sort of have a reality check that the Treasury does have a role to play in its the costs of its decisions?
Look, I think about this a lot, which is that the decisions that were made in response to COVID-19 from an economic perspective, both in terms of extraordinary money printing and extraordinary fiscal borrowing have had impacts that are still being felt hugely today. And as you say, part of that is the unwind cost of those bond purchases, which have cost New Zealand taxpayers billions and billions of dollars. And part of those costs is the effect that that had in terms of inflation spikes and interest rate spikes, house price spikes. And I think everyone involved in those decisions would do well to reflect on them and learn lessons.
There's two more questions on the supermarket.
Thank you.
So, in defence of the stop sign, Costco's formation led to huge costs for Auckland Council. It needed to effectively build new buses to go there, had to expand roads and the motorway. There is reason to carefully look into building these new mega supermarkets. Are you going to have those protections?
A lack of competition has a massive cost on every Kiwi, and that gets forgotten far too quickly in this conversation. The fast track process does provide a really clear way in which councils can work with potential developers to work through those infrastructure issues. This is about doing it quickly, not taking forever and a day about it. It doesn't need to take 4 years to negotiate a traffic management plan. And actually what that speaks to is councils who don't face the right incentives, because their incentive is to say, oh, well, this is a bit tricky and painful, so I'll just draw it out. Well, we're changing the incentives to say, this is so important for Kiwi shoppers that you just need to hurry up and get on with it.
But will the government help councils pay for it? That's why they drag it out.
Well, actually, traditionally what you see is that those arrangements are struck between developers and councils, and developers typically bear most of those costs, well, a significant portion of those costs.
What is the time frame for working out these measures have been successful, and then when will we find out if you're going to take that nuclear option and break up the duopoly?
Well, of course, we'll be monitoring closely to see whether new entrants use these measures. We will also be taking steps to again engage with international players to say, hey, look at us, we've got a big fat go sign, we want you, we make it really easy here in New Zealand, and we'll see how people respond to that. As I say, we're conscious that there are a number of factors that go into these kind of business investment decisions, not least of which will be the global economic environment. But ultimately, what I'm doing is progressing this at pace in real time, while also continuing to sharpen up how we enforce competition law and fair trading law, and at the same time looking carefully into these structural issues. Whether or not and in what timing the Cabinet decides to progress that is for discussions that Cabinet's yet to have,
Is the reality of
based on information we don't yet have.
Is the reality of the situation that, you know, we're an isolated island and it costs a lot of money to get food here, and, you know, even distributing food within New Zealand can be difficult, and we just need to accept that it's going to cost more for us to buy food from the supermarket in New Zealand versus if we lived in Europe, for example?
Well, of course, those are all factors, but they're also convenient excuses if you're a duopolist making massive margins right now. And the reality is we've taken those factors and then exaggerated them to the power of 10 by being world experts in putting up red tape and green tape every time someone wants to build a new supermarket. And so the point that the government is fixed by is there are things we can do to make it cheaper and easier to set up a new store, and all of the hand-wringing about the reasons we shouldn't do that and the processes that are so important has been completely overblown in proportion to how significant it is for a Kiwi shopper if they have a competitive supermarket in their community open that offers lower prices than they've been used to. That is a prize worth pursuing, and we're not convinced that previous governments have pursued it hard enough.
Can you quickly just explain what you mean when you say you actively explore options for potential importers of food to bring new product lines into the country?
Yeah, so one of the issues for potential entrants into this market, including one potential domestic competitor, they think that the way to be competitive is to source products from alternative supply chains to those used by Woolworths and Foodstuffs. That is, bring in food from overseas. The challenge they face when they do that is New Zealand rightly has our own specific labelling requirements, which are different from, say, in the US or the UK or Asia. And so what they have been grappling with is what would that require? Would we need to relabel all of the products? Because obviously that's expensive, time-consuming, potentially difficult. And so we've been looking at the provisions in the Food Act which currently require New Zealand to have specific food labelling rules that align with Australia. We think it's really important to keep ensuring every consumer has very good information about what they're eating. But we're looking at, are there options here using new technology, for example, i.e. could you scan a QR code at the aisle so that if you wanted the New Zealand-based label, it was available digitally, which could potentially save the cost of all of that relabelling. So we're working those issues through. It's important in doing this that we stay aligned with Australia, with whom we have shared rules in this place, but we don't want that to be a barrier. We want people who are looking at importing food from elsewhere to know that we're alongside them and we're thinking creatively about how we could make it work while protecting Kiwi food buyers. Yeah.
You've been to the Costco.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
but in terms of the cabinet manual, I'm not endorsing any particular place except to say that it is amazing when you see something completely different that has not previously been available in New Zealand.
You've been to an unnamed supermarket in West Auckland. Have any other government ministers been there and sort of given you their feedback on how it was?
Oh, look, no doubt. The feedback is this. When you see things being priced just so much cheaper than you're used to seeing at your local supermarket, it's compelling because it makes you stop and say, maybe all those things that we've been told about how it's impossible to possibly price things lower in New Zealand because we're a long, skinny country and it's all hard and it's all difficult, maybe we should think again about all of those claims that have been made, because if Costco can do it, then maybe it can be done. And actually, if you look internationally, when you get these competitor brands turning out, whether it's Aldi, whether it's Costco, everyone pulls up their socks, because the thing is, every supermarket has choices about their margins, about their efficiency, about the ultimate deal they deliver for Kiwi shoppers. And so I'm convinced that competition is the secret sauce that delivers a fairer deal for New Zealanders at the checkout aisle.
Minister, I think you indicated that there was a case where it took 4 years to consent a supermarket from the consenting process to receiving consent. I understand that there has been some confusion about the timings and what was included in some cases there. Which supermarket are you?
I think that was a Woolworths example that was used, and certainly what we've been told is that on average it can take 18 months and about $1 million. So there will be extreme cases, there's probably also some best case scenarios, but average 18 months? Come on, that's too long. So let's say tomorrow Costco says we want to open a new shop in a New Zealand city. Do you want to wait 18 months when the government could just get rid of the red tape that's making it take that long, could reduce that to a matter of months?
And you're confident there has been a case where it's taken 4 years?
Well, look, that's what I've been advised, and that I've been advised has been reported on. And the examples that have been given to us through the request for information process, I do recall a specific example of 3 years.
Costco has said as recently as July 2022 that there might be capacity for another Costco store in Rolleston and Christchurch, and potentially, but it's going to be hard to do, in Wellington. So 2 more stores, maybe another one in Auckland. But is that it, or do you know if they're changing their mind?
Well, you should talk to Costco about their plans. I'm not their spokesperson.
Can you tell us anything at all? I mean, acknowledging the commercial sensitivities, can you tell us anything at all about those 5 domestic potential competitors?
Yeah, these were a range of entities, some of which were consortia, that is a range of different parties coming together to say, here's a proposition. Some of them had gone to quite a lot of work to do international scanning of what's happened in supermarket sectors overseas, to examine what are the kind of formats that are working internationally. Because one of the things about our market is we haven't seen the innovation that you've seen offshore. Offshore you often get what they call hypermarkets, so you can do your supermarket shop, but you can also buy some merchandise and some other things at the same time. They also tend to have these smaller box hard discount supermarkets that have quite a limited range. They might only have 1 kind of strawberry jam instead of 6, but that strawberry jam is cheaper. And so they've looked at those things internationally, and they've looked at what they hear from New Zealanders about what they want. They've considered strategies. In some cases those strategies would include renting or leasing spaces, using spaces of a range of types, and they've considered how they would access capital. One of the strong themes from those potential domestic competitors was what we're worried about is we get going and then those big guys just stamp all over us, and that's why we've decided we have to amend the Commerce Act to prevent that from happening.
You said you were going to amend the Commerce Act in relation to predatory pricing.
Yes.
Would those amendments only involve the regulated grocery retailers, or would that be everybody?
They will involve everybody.
Will the express lane be open to the duopoly?
The test for the express lane will be, can it be demonstrated this project will increase regional or national competition? So it's pretty hard to see how adding one of the duopolists would enhance competition.
Because it could allow them to entrench their position, right, if they could.
Exactly. And so what the government will be doing to provide absolute clarity when we pass this legislation is introducing a government policy statement setting out objectively our views on what constitutes good competition.
If there was just a New World store in one town and Foodstuffs wanted to set up a supermarket there, would that would potentially be increasing competition? Would it be open to them in that situation?
Well, New World is owned by Foodstuffs, so Foodstuffs opening a pack and save,
and if
arguably that wouldn't be competition.
To open one. Because there are towns where just one of the two groups have a supermarket.
So the test would be, does that enhance regional competition significantly? And so, as I say, we will be setting out in a government policy statement how we expect that to be deliberated on. There's 2 steps here. The first is the Minister needs to assess the application and say, does it meet the test? Will I refer it to the fast track panel? And then the second step is that the fast track panel, when they're considering whether or not to expedite the consents, needs to consider how it delivers on the objectives of the Act. And in doing that, we will require them to also have regard to our statement on competition.
Are you able to say anything about the option, there's a cost-benefit analysis underway on structural reforms. Can you say anything about what those options are that analysis is being conducted on? Do they include sort of supermarket sales and divestment of distribution centres, for example?
I'm not going to get ahead of that before having shared proposals with Cabinet. As I say, we are looking at a couple of structural options. We need to do cost-benefit analysis on them, and we are stepping through that very carefully.
Did anyone raise the state of the New Zealand economy and the overseas, or actually the domestic proposals? Did any of them say, look, we might be interested, but the economy's in a bit of a funk and we just don't think we can make much money there at the moment?
Not that I can specifically recall. They did, of course, raise that one of the issues any business needs to encounter is getting someone to back you with their capital, that someone believes it's a good enough proposition that they want to invest in it, and they were conscious they needed to prove that case. One of the things that came through really strongly from the Kiwi businesses wanting to expand or enter in the space is, I think, a very genuine concern for fellow New Zealanders, that actually they can see that the current situation isn't working and a fairer deal is needed, and they want to be part of the solution. And that includes some of the niche retailers and alternative retailers you're seeing operating today. They want to be part of the solution.
In terms of the access to capital, are you saying that there's the supermarket competition issue is a banking competition issue as well?
No, that's not what I'm saying, but I'm just saying that for any business, if you want to make your business work, you've got to get someone to give you financial backing.
What would the benefit be of merging the ministries for women and Pacific people and disabilities?
Look, that's not something Cabinet has considered, so I wouldn't get ahead of Cabinet having even read proposals on that.
Have you read proposals about merging the ministries of Transport, Housing and Urban Development?
Look, I'm aware that there has been some consideration of that, but certainly not by Cabinet.
David Seymour, it wasn't that long ago that David Seymour announced a fast-track plan proposal under the Act Party for supermarkets to let the cat out of the bag a bit early. Well,
I can assure you these irons were in the fire well ahead of those statements, but I welcome them to the party.
Can you please give me more detail about what you mean by predatory pricing? Is that loss leading or...?
Yes. Now here is something that I prepared earlier so that I can be very precise with you. So obviously predatory pricing happens when a dominant firm, so it has to have market power, sets prices below cost for a sustained period with the purpose of driving out rivals or blocking out new entrants. And the problem is that they then raise prices once the competition is weakened. And so that's currently already illegal under our Commerce Act, but we have only had 2 cases of enforcement in New Zealand since 1994, and that's because it's really legally uncertain about how you prosecute these cases. So what we are going to do is introduce a clear internationally aligned test so that businesses know exactly where the line is. And so that test is about creating a specific economic test so that it's really clear in law, this is when it's gone too far, this is what will trigger a prosecution. And we've got good international examples to work with there. Basically, our Commerce Act has fallen behind the times, and we're going to fix it. Predatory pricing is basically the big guys using their might to make it impossible for a new entrant to establish themselves.
Would a loss be an example of that?
No, it wouldn't, specifically in the example you're talking about, because Costco could not be claimed to have market power. They are not a dominant firm. And actually, specifically, you would allow for short periods of promotion or loss leading to occur. It's when it's done with the express intent of excluding the competition that it becomes a problem.
It seems quite hard to prove.
Well, that's why we need to introduce the specific economic test. And as I say, this isn't beyond the wit of man. Other jurisdictions, the UK and elsewhere, do have clear tests that have allowed for multiple prosecutions. New Zealand has had only 2 enforcement actions. Clearly our law's not working. So we have modelled our amendments on what's working overseas.
Have you had any advice on whether this is likely to cause changes in the petrol retailing market, which I guess is the other area of the market where people often claim pocket or predatory pricing?
Yeah, look, I'm aware that these are issues that have not just been raised in the supermarket sector. These are issues that have been raised in a range of sectors, and what this will do for all sectors where there are market dominant firms is set out clear triggers for potential prosecutions of predatory pricing. Hey, thanks.